Hey Phil, this is Cameron.
Hey, what's up, Cam?
Man, I gotta talk to you about something. Have you been watching the news?
Dude, what is going on? Pocket politics with Phill and Cam. Why? Why are we doing this?
I think it's gonna matter.
The only thing they want to talk about is guns and abortion.
My own views, I want to see the Republicans get away from the social issues.
I'm not saying that Republicans are idiots.
So you hear something like that, it's powerful.
As an American, I was disgusted.
You could make the argument that you're probably more in the middle as well.
I think that's just a story that somebody's telling you.
Again, well, with the facts, this is true. Everybody knows it.
What facts? What facts? Who does this hurt more, Republicans or Democrats?
Boy, I've been thinking about that.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Pocket Politics with Phill and Cam. Cameron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Seems like you had a pretty lucky morning or successful morning this morning. So, starting off on the right foot, right?
Yeah, I had a good morning turkey hunting, so I had some success, so that's always good. So, today's been a good day, and I'm ready to talk some politics. So, what do we got on this episode, Phil?
Yeah, so we're gonna dig in. So we can't get away from talking about Steve Bannon. He will be back at the start of the episode. We are gonna talk Trump. A whole bunch of things going on as usual, right? Pretty consistent news appearances from him. There was some hearing aid legislation that got itself worked out, a big FDA decision this week. And then we're going to jump overseas to the English Prime Minister, Liz Truss, resigning a day after she said she is not a quitter. From there, debates. We've got Florida, Ohio, Utah, Georgia, all over the place with these things this week. And some voting news from the state of Georgia, as well as Arizona. Is it becoming the Florida 2.0? We will talk about crazy stuff going on in Arizona, and then we'll hit a couple races at the end as usual. I think we're going to talk about the Northeast, Rhode Island, and New York, and then move to the Midwest for the Indiana Senate race. Cam?
Please jump onto our Facebook, Pocket Politics with Phill and Cam. We've been putting a lot of stuff on there. Give us a like. Certainly follow us, comment, all that good stuff. We're also on Instagram, and so you can see us out on Instagram.
That's it. P squared underscore. Yeah, underscore Phill and Cam.
Okay, yep. Thank you for that. And then you can also send us an email, and you can check out our website as well. Our email and all of our social media stuff is linked up through our website, pocketpolitics.co. So, Phil, why don't we get started?
All right. So Bannon's in the news. He looks like they sentenced him this week, and he is sentenced with 4 months in jail, right? Which is about 2/3 of what the Justice Department was asking for. So not a lot, but they still got some time. And as of right now, I think he's going to stall and just try and appeal. What are your thoughts about this one?
Well, yeah, he got, like you said, 4 months. I mean, he didn't get everything that they were, had originally put out there that they were going for on him. I'm sure he'll stall. It's a tactic. I mean, he looked like he was in every bit good spirits yesterday outside the courtroom. Did you see him trucking around out there going on his rants, Phil?
Absolutely, yeah. And he was dressed for the part, too, in typical Steve Bannon style. I did like, that they had that vote for change or something, November 8th sign behind him, which is hilarious because at his press conference, he talked about it. And then as he turned around and walked away, the guy carrying the sign turned around too, and the back of the sign basically said, lock up all the traitors.
Yeah. You mentioned his, his appearance. That green jacket was pretty on point, was it not, Phil?
It looked great. And, very Bannon-ish with the multiple shirts on below.
And he had a nice I don't know, probably 2 or 3 days stubble going on. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less. And his hair looked, I don't know, greasy and unkempt as usual. So, I mean, he was bringing it yesterday. So, you know, I, I don't know if our listeners have ever really done any investigating into Bannon's background. I know you and I have a little bit, but just for our listeners, he does have kind of an interesting background, and kind of what I guess brought him to where he's at now. I mean, you know, he was born in Norfolk, Virginia, and parents were Democrats and everything. And joins the Navy. Right, he's in the Navy, late '70s, early '80s. Um, sees, or he's in the military rather during the Reagan era, or when Reagan comes to office, and like just gets hugely inspired by Reagan. Then he does some stuff in investment banking and some other things, Phil, and then he's even doing some science stuff with that biosphere thing in the '90s. That, I mean, it's kind of odd as much as he jumps around. And then what, late '90s, early 2000s, he starts getting into his media empire, and it's kind of all taken off from there, has it not, Phil?
For the most part, I mean, he's also dabbled in, regimes around the world trying to promote, fascist politics throughout Europe and stuff. But let's not forget, I mean, that dabbled in science, but that biosphere thing was a pretty big failure. I don't know if you remember,
Oh
how
yeah,
that all turned out, but
I do. Yeah,
uh,
I'm not trying to sit here and say he was like a raging success at it. I was just saying he does have kind of a, I don't know, kind of a varied background. But and then of course he finds himself in the Trump administration as the, you know, what was he, the chief strategist under Trump, I guess, for the first few months of Trump's presidency. And I don't know if you remember that, Phil, but do you remember when he was on the Trump staff and he actually, I guess, had to wear a suit because he was working in and around the Oval Office? He just didn't look right in a suit, did he?
yeah, I don't really remember that. But what I mean, I think the one thing I remember is he didn't last very long, right?
No, it was just a few
Uh,
months.
yeah, which I guess is not very I mean, it's pretty par for the course with the Trump administration. I mean, nobody lasts very long. So a few months, what is that, like six Scaramucci's? Is that?
Yeah, I was
Uh,
going to say he actually probably outlasted many people there, but I was just trying to look up to see if I had an exact figure on how many months he actually worked for Trump.
yeah, I feel
Let's
like if
see.
we talk about people
Oh, eight
working for
months.
Trump,
8 months.
oh, okay. So that's almost 30 Scaramucci's,
Yeah,
which I
he
feel
left.
is like the appropriate measuring tool for time
So he
in
left.
service under Trump administration.
Yeah, he left 8 months into the Trump administration, and guess what? From there, he went and rejoined Breitbart. So right back into the media he went, and now he finds himself in plenty of hot water. He's got this jail coming up. I mean, Phil, is his appeal or his stall tactic going to go anywhere, or is this guy going to do the full 4 months?
If anything, I think it may adjust the sentencing a little bit. Keep in mind, there's a hefty fine there with it too. Um, so if anything, it may change that, but I don't know. And this is just strictly for contempt of Congress, so it's not like a real huge crime, right?
He's still in trouble too. I think he's still isn't he still facing these federal charges of mail fraud, money laundering, and all that stuff that he had with that "We Build the Wall" thing. I don't think that ever got settled, did it?
No, no, he's still looking down the barrel per se of that
So,
investigation. I think there's a couple other things that he's tied
so
up in.
let me just ask you with that, Phil. Do you think? I mean, do you think he's going to get in trouble for that kind of stuff, like that mail fraud and such? I mean, do you think, or is this going to kind of be it, and that stuff's going to be swept under the rug? Where do you think that stuff all goes?
No, I think he gets in trouble for that too. I mean, that's a pretty looks like a pretty easy case to solve. Uh, I think it's just one of those things. The Justice Department is so busy right now. They're going to get to it when they get to it.
Okay, so you think Mr. Bannon's got some more hot water to wade through here in the future? So okay, well,
Absolutely.
all right. Well, that sounds like that's enough on the best dressed man in politics, Steve Bannon. Now on to some Donald Trump news.
Yeah, so the former president had a pretty eventful week this week. He deposed or was deposed under oath for the E. Jean Carroll case, which is not the not it's related to the accusation of rape, but it's a It's
Oh,
a
oh yeah.
defamation lawsuit
Okay.
that's related to his comments specifically about her. And then he was also subpoenaed formally by the January 6th committee. That was yesterday on
Yep.
Friday. So he has the subpoena. I don't know if you saw this, but the subpoena was just one page of the document. There was a several page kind of written statement in there. Um, that it just frankly looked like it was personally penned by Jamie Raskin because of the legal language, but it kind of alluded to some of the precedent there. um, and it talked about how all of these other presidents have been subpoenaed and appeared before congressional committees, and all this stuff. And I even heard a thing yesterday that um, dropping this on a Friday is even part of the historical precedence.
Yeah.
That's typically when they drop subpoenas like that.
Yeah. The news with this guy just keeps on ticking. I mean, I feel like every week we have to give the Donald Trump update. Is this guy ever going to go away from the well, no, I don't think so, because just when we think he goes away from the news, something more comes up. And then after all that, he'll probably at some point announce that he's running for president in 2024. So, I mean, I have a feeling he's going to be in the news every single week from now to who knows when. Don't you think, Phil?
I do, but and keep in mind that we've just basically gotten two of the five things that we were going to talk about with Trump out of the way. So we've still got more stuff coming. But I just to point on that, I'll be honest with you, I don't think he runs. And we've talked about this before, but I think there's two major reasons, right? I think on one hand, he's got this level of shame that's associated with losing that he absolutely can't stand. And so I don't think he's willing to take that chance again. The other part of that is that I don't I think that, with him getting all these small dollar donations and that using these organizations to constantly grift off of his supporters and holding these rallies and stuff like that, he's making way too much money. If he announces that he's, a candidate for 2024, he's not going to be able to make that money. It's all going to go to a presidential campaign and not to his own pocket and his family's pocket. And so I think that's a big part of it too, because he's making so much money off the backs of his supporters right now, who, keep in mind, a majority of them probably can't afford that, right? And are sending him money and complaining about gas and grocery prices at the same time. That I think he's just going to keep that going, right? Because that's how he's
Yeah.
paying for his legal fees, and he's the legal fees have to be a lot because he's tied up in so many different cases. I mean, what was it, 19 or 20 active cases that he's currently involved in.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point about the cash flow with him. I guess that's something that I hadn't really thought about that angle. My thoughts on him running are nothing shocks me with that guy, Phil. And the minute someone says he's not going to do something, he turns around and does it. So in my opinion, I'm just going to assume that he's going to run until he doesn't. You know, and again,
Yeah.
I'm not betting money on that. I'm just saying this guy continues to do what no one expects him to do. So I just assume we're going to see him at some point here. I don't know, maybe after the first of the year, into the new year or something, announce his candidacy for 2024. He'll probably do it early, get the momentum going. I could be wrong though. Who knows? You got a couple more notes though to talk about on that, Phil. I'm sorry. I'll let you go back to talking about his cases.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, the other thing was that pretty early on this week, this judge, I believe in the Fifth Circuit, which is out in California, came out and said that uh, the evidence pretty much points to the fact that Trump is guilty of several different types of fraud. And one of the ones specifically mentioned was fraud against the United States of America. And so some of that's based on all the different evidence that's present there in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, but also some of that's coming out of the January 6th stuff that they've kind of presented but not totally shared with the Justice Department yet. So that again is bad news. Like when when a judge basically comes out and says, um, yeah, all evidence points in the direction that he is guilty of at least a couple of different crimes, probably several. Um, it's not good. And at the end of the day, he wasn't the only one. Big Justice, the Justice Department itself came out and said that he is likely guilty of obstruction of justice as well. So, the obstruction thing, we thought we were going to get. Um, that was kind of the closest one I think that everybody thought they were going to tie to him. But now they've got several different people coming out and saying things about several different types of crimes. So certainly not great for him.
Well, like I said, I mean, he just keeps rolling on with news stories and what. But I'll be honest with you though, as far as like the nation is concerned, and I guess when I say nation, I should say the voting bloc. I mean, we're going to talk about this later on with races and debates and whatnot. But man, it doesn't seem like many people in the country really care about him right now. Like they've kind of forgotten about him, and the Republicans have really taken a grasp of momentum here lately in the polls. So like people that they're interviewing and polling and such. I mean, the news about him doesn't seem to be shaping these midterms maybe quite like they thought it was going to earlier in the summer. So I'll say that. Like it seems like people want to get on from this.
Well, it doesn't seem like it's shaping the polls, but we don't know about the midterms, right? So maybe it's not shaping the polls, but again, we do not know if it is in fact shaping the midterms yet at all.
Well,
But we'll talk a little bit about that later.
yeah,
The kind of final thing that came out of Trump news this week too was just the I believe it was the House committee. It was a House committee um, that's like I think it was like an oversight committee that was talking about came out and kind of reported that you know when Secret Service goes and stays with the president at certain places that they're supposed to be charged a government rate and all that stuff's pre-negotiated. And they're saying that Trump was charging in some cases more than 3 times what the acceptable level for a government rate is for Secret Service to stay at his private hotels and resorts and stuff like that when he would visit. So a little bit of controversy about that, but we can certainly move on. I almost guaranteed next week there will be more Trump news, and we'll
yeah,
bring all this stuff back up again.
yeah. I was gonna say I don't think we're done talking about the man. I mean, well, we can finish tonight, but he'll be back next week for our listeners. Rest assured. So why don't we look at this hearing aid legislation that was in the news, Phil?
Yeah, so it was less about the legislation itself because the legislation was passed back in 2017, but nothing ever happened with it. So it basically sat there, and it's the legislation itself is kind of a workaround. So what they originally wanted to do was to get hearing benefits covered under Medicare and Medicaid. And that obviously is not going to happen. They were going to get it done earlier this year because that was actually a part of Build Back Better, which did not pass. Um, and because of that, they basically resurrected this legislation from 2017 that was a bipartisan bill from the House that was fully approved. And President Biden basically signed an executive order telling the FDA just to get it done. So now
Yeah,
hearing aids will be available over the counter for millions of Americans. I think I read something yesterday that said, it was like 27 million Americans have hearing problems in the United States.
Yeah, so this was a bipartisan bill between Senator Chuck Grassley out of Iowa and Elizabeth Warren out of Massachusetts. So, it's interesting, right? I mean, Grassley, he's a pretty conservative Republican, longtime senator, and then Elizabeth Warren is pretty progressive Democrat, and they definitely came together on this. From what I've seen, it had quite a lot of support. I mean, I don't think there was much pushback at all on this bill. I think the stall was just with the FDA back and forth. And I know I read some statements from Senator Grassley and Senator Warren that talked about the stalls and how they were trying to get it back going and pushing it and on and on. And they worked it again in 2021 and thought they had some movement and now finally got some movement here. So this looked to
Well,
be some true bipartisan efforts there.
Yeah, I think the push in 2021 was with Build Back Better because they were pushing to get it onto Build Back Better itself, because that was just going to make it covered under Medicare, Medicaid. But I'll be honest with you, um, since Medicare and Medicaid are funded by the taxpayers, I think this is actually a really good workaround to that. I think it's going to be more beneficial. And I read something. I think I had told you this yesterday that it was like more than $500. I read something yesterday too that said like at the cheapest, hearing aids cost people over $1,000. So this is gonna, you don't have to, no longer have to have a prescription to get it. You can just go to your store and buy it like you would a pair of reading glasses. So
Yeah, it's gonna from what I
certainly good.
understand it's gonna be available, I guess, at Walmart, your local pharmacies or whatever, and, I mean, who knows now what the prices will be on them, but, should be cheaper, like I said, I mean, it's always nice to see bipartisan efforts, and it's nice to see the senators and whatnot work together on some things like, my opinion, they're supposed to do. And so, hey, they worked on it. This thing got done. Like I said, it seems like there's an overwhelming support for it. So we'll see, we'll
Yeah,
see
and
what
it's
prices
gonna
are.
yeah, it's gonna bring down. They expect it to significantly bring down prices and benefit millions of Americans, right? So which should be good. That's what we want to see is our government doing things that make people's lives better.
Yeah, yeah, it took some
Um,
time, but our government certainly was functioning there. But you know what? I'm looking overseas to the government that doesn't look like it's functioning very well at all, Phil, over there in the UK. What do you think about this Liz Truss news?
Yeah, so I mean, what day was it? Was it Wednesday? I think she stepped down. Maybe Thursday, but either way, there's a sound bite of her um, saying that she's a fighter, not a quitter, and then the very next day she resigns. Under significant pressure from her own party, um, which is what they refer to in England as the Tories, but as that is the largely conservative party. Um, the economy has been shaken due to a lot of kind of um, rifts and lack of trust. The value of the pound is at a pretty significant low right now due to that.
Yeah,
And
there's just, I mean, widespread across England. I mean, just doubts in her and everything that they've got going on over there has just caused, I mean, for lack of a better word, panic in a lot of these things. And so, like you were saying, the pound, the markets over there, it's a real blow over there in the UK. And so, I mean, now all the news is what happens next? Where do they go? The Tory party, I mean, they're furious at Liz Truss. They are. I mean, they're losing their minds over this thing. So, yeah, I mean, Phil, what are they going to do to get themselves out of this? I mean, what's next? Who's going to take over the reins over there in the UK?
Well, I mean, there's several names of which I'm not familiar with because I just don't follow, the Parliament the same way I do
Yeah,
Congress.
I'm
However,
with you.
yeah, it should be noted that one of the names is the former disgraced Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and so there's a push to kind of bring him back. But what's interesting though is that the Conservative Party in England effectively. Um, felt consequences from trying to replicate the GOP's plan, right? I mean, she came out and said, we want this supply side economic plan, tax breaks for corporations, and then also further deregulation in the government and deregulation for businesses. And it did not work out well for her or the party's favor as a whole.
So,
They're still going to remain in power because the voting system in England is quite a bit different than it is here. Um, but keep in mind that even though they are the majority party in the House of Commons and the House of Lords in the Parliament, they are not really in the majority of anything. So
yeah,
there's a lot
they
more parties over there. It's kind of a lot more mixed up.
their systems are certainly different than ours, and I'm not a true expert in their things. I know, there's been a lot made about Liz Truss coming in with tax cuts and such, and you know, debates can be had for days on end about that. I mean, you and I are certainly on different ends of the spectrum on stuff like that. But I will say this: I know people are saying this about, oh, she, all the moves she put in place crashed everything in Europe and or in the United Kingdom. And the woman was only in power for 44 days. So I don't care how many tax cuts she was trying to push or anything like that. Like that stuff didn't, that's not enough time for her to really just come in and tank things. Now, what I do think contributed to, the UK's hardships here was fear, right? I mean, fear of this woman coming in and not knowing what she was doing. I mean, she basically, for her advisors and whatnot, she just took good friends, people that really it sounded like didn't even have any business being around politics. And so I think there was just a deep fear. I think she's caused a real riff in her party over there now, and I think what they've got to do now is figure out how they're going to repair this and move forward. Because I'll be honest with you, this revolving prime minister situation in the UK does not look good for them.
It should be mentioned as well that this is not just her, right? I agree with you on that because nobody can do this much damage in this short amount of time. But this is on the back of the Tories as a whole, right? The Tories were the big push behind Brexit, right? And that is people are starting to feel economic woes from Brexit movements. There's several other things that are going on with this, and the Tories have basically been um, running the show for a considerable time as far as that goes. So it it does go to show that this was just kind of the nail in the coffin that they could no longer take because they're headed in a winter. And guess what? They have to import most of their energy to that's used to heat people's homes, and they're already projecting they're going to have serious problems. And now with the pound at an even lower value than it was before because it's been declining over a significant period of time. um Now that oil to heat people's homes and those costs are going to be that much more impact on the English, right? The people of the UK. So yes, it's not solely her, but the party as a whole has some reckoning to do.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they'll have to work on repairing this, and we'll see where this goes down the road. But uh, my thoughts on this, I mean, they've just got to get their stuff figured out. Like I said earlier, they've got to, they're too big of a power in the world to be going through this kind of drama and making the headlines over this kind of stuff. And so to our fans, if there are any over there in the UK, certainly hope you guys can get through all this stuff and get yourselves back on the right foot. But I'd like to shift our attention now to the back to our own country. And we've got our midterm elections coming up very soon. And there are more debates heating up around the nation. Momentum is really seems to be on the side of the Republicans. The Democrats are trying to push back and trying to claw their way back up to what they thought was kind of maybe a chance they had even at the Senate. So why don't we look at Florida here for starters? There was quite a debate, I think, kind of a mudslinging fest down there, Phil, between Val Demings and Marco Rubio. Did you catch some of that debate?
Yeah, that was exactly the word I was going to use, was the mudslinging. I mean, it was pretty nuts. Yeah, and we talked about it before about potentially playing some clips, but there was less substance, I think, to that debate. Maybe more than the debate we're going to talk about in Georgia, but yeah, just heavily, um, a heavy dose of shit talking from both sides. I mean, at one point, that Val Deming said that the only thing Marco Rubio has ran successfully was his mouth. But it was a lot of that, Cam.
Yeah, they were
I
going. They were. I was going to say they were going back and forth on abortion. I mean, I know Val Demings was trying to hit Rubio, saying that he was very extreme on abortion, and then he was trying to push back, saying, "Well, you're extreme. You don't want any limits," and that got ugly. And then Val Demings was pushing him some on guns, and Marco Rubio quickly pushed back and said, "Well, look, every measure you're talking about putting in place for guns would not have." Wouldn't have done anything in these mass shootings that you've talked about, and yeah, what was interesting though was that both sides seemed to kind of avoid Donald Trump. I mean, like Val Demings didn't really bring him up, and Rubio wasn't trying to have him. So like it was interesting how they were staying away from Donald Trump in that one. But I mean, seeing that debate, Phil, I can't imagine it probably changes a whole lot of minds in Florida, does it?
You know, I it's hard to tell. I mean, I thought Val Demings for the most part actually did a pretty good job. Um, but again, you're right. I mean, Marco Rubio has already had a sizable lead there, so I'm just not convinced that it's going to do a whole lot of difference, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, it's been one of those things where the polls got tight for a little while. I mean, Rubio seems to have the momentum, but I mean, at the end of the day, you and I have said this repeatedly over and over on the podcast. It's tough to beat an incumbent, and Rubio is just that. So, I mean, I think Val Demings she's got a steep hill to climb here. I mean, you kind of said it too. It's hard to tell right now with the polls going back and forth, but I got to give the edge to Rubio in this. Like I said, my opinion, I'm not saying either Rubio or Demings did a great job, bad job, whatever. I thought it was kind of a neutral debate, and I just don't think it changes much out of that one. So
yeah, I was gonna say if I feel like for this one, if you're a Democrat, Demings won the debate, and if you're a Republican, Rubio won the debate. That's kind of how I feel about it. But
yeah,
on
and
aggregate, I mean, Rubio's up. He's up by four in the polls.
it's
Um,
and I was
so she's got some ground to cover.
Yeah, yeah, she does, and there's not a whole lot of time left to cover that ground. So it'll be interesting to see that race, but I feel pretty comfortable with Rubio in that race going forward. I mean, we'll see here in a short amount of time how that one turns out, but I just think the way Florida's been leaning red the last few election cycles, and they to be honest with you, it looks like as each election cycle comes, they get a little bit more red each time. So yeah, I think it's a state that Rubio is poised to do well in. And I'll be honest with you, I could see him even doing maybe a little bit better than four. I could see him actually probably having a pretty good turnout. When the votes are finally counted there. So I will shift gears though to another debate and what I think is a pretty hot contest, and that's up there in Ohio. And JD Vance and Tim Ryan went at it again in yet another slugfest here this past week. Man, those guys, Phil, are just duking it out, aren't they? Like two old school boxers.
Yeah, but it was a really good debate. I mean, I thought I thought Tim Ryan did an excellent job. Um, he is certainly even looking better in the polls as time goes by. I mean, right now the aggregate has JD Vance on a .9 lead, which is well within. We talk about being within the margin of error. This is probably as in the margin of error as you can get. Um, and I think the debates are kind of helping him out because he's doing a really good job
Yeah, I was gonna
taking it to JD Vance.
I was gonna say that too, Phil. Here's a case where I think the debates certainly aren't hurting Tim Ryan. Again, I'll say this: he's run a great campaign. He really has. I got to give him a lot of credit. He's doing what he needs to do in a state, the state of Ohio, which is a pretty red state, and he's trying to run as this moderate Democrat, if you will, kind of you know flirting with a almost independent streak, and certainly I guess I say flirting almost with Republicans and plenty of things, and he's distancing himself from the Biden administration, and I think he's doing what he needs to do there. um he is overperformed. I mean, we talked about this. No one really gave him much of a shot, some months back, and the guy is just staying in there. And every time I think he's, takes a hit and he's maybe going to disappear, he does not. He roars back. So, you know, I don't know. I just almost had this gut that come election night, he could almost pull an upset off there, I think. I mean, again, it's a steep hill to climb in a place like Ohio, but I mean, I gotta say, Tim Ryan, I mean, there's a shot this guy could pull off an upset. And I mean, he certainly holds his own out there on that debate stage, and he's running a lot of ads. I mean, we talked about the funding thing last time. Certainly not trying to rehash all that, but I am surprised the Democrats aren't floating more money in. And I know you said that they feel like they're more competitive elsewhere, but man, I think this guy's competitive. We're seeing a lot of other Democrats kind of fall off or fall away. The momentum seems to be going the other direction for him. Tim Ryan seems to be holding his own. So I'm just surprised the Democrats
Yeah,
aren't floating him some money.
keep in mind that he's holding his own in a state that statewide historically is about 12 points Republican, right? And
Yep.
went for Trump in 2020 and 2016, both by 8 points. So this is a heavily, Trump supporting Republican state, and he's doing an excellent job. And I will say, we kind of mentioned it before, but I think the debates are helping him out. If people are turning on their TV and watching those things or seeing the clips on the local news, that is working in his favor. But with that being
So
said, there was
hey,
another really interesting debate in another really interesting race this week out in Utah.
oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. This is you just said it, a very interesting race. I mean, between Evan McMullen and Mike Lee out there, um, it is things are really getting tight in Utah. They're really getting interesting. Um, last weekend, Evan McMullen was on Meet the Press, and I found it interesting. Chuck Todd was talking to him, about what he would do as a senator. And he asked him multiple times, are you going to caucus with either side? Because to be fair, we do have a couple of independents in the Senate, right? We've got Angus King, and we've got Bernie Sanders, and they both, while independents, they caucus with the Democrats. And he said, "So are you going to caucus with one side or the other?" And he insisted. He's like, "No, I will not. I'm going to read these bills as they come in, and I will vote for what is best for the country and for Utah." And so, yeah, I mean, it was leading into the debate before the debate even occurred. I mean, he had. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to give him some props. I thought he had a pretty strong performance or interview, if you will, on Meet the Press. Did you see any of that Meet the Press interview, Phil?
I did, as a matter of fact, we've got a clip, so I'll go ahead and play the clip.
No, Chuck, I will not. I will maintain my independence. I will not caucus with either side. And by the way, Chuck, I think that this will give Utah added value of influence in the Senate that it just doesn't have. Certainly, we have in Senator Romney someone who has gotten a lot done for our state and our country, working across party lines to get things done. Yeah. With Senator Lee, we get none of that. He sits on his hands until it's time to vote no, and then he goes and complains about our country on cable news. And I'm just not going to do that. I think that we've seen well enough over the past year or two, especially, that the senators in the chamber who are willing to act with greater independence, serving their constituents, standing up to party bosses, standing up to extremist factions and special interest groups, they have the most influence in the chamber. They're more influential, I think, even than the party bosses. And I want that for Utah, and I know we'll do a great deal of good with it, serving this way.
All right, Cam, there you go. So that's part of the Meet the Press interview. But not to mention just that interview, he killed it in the debate too. I watched several portions of this debate, and I would say in this debate there was a clear winner. That being him. I mean, he basically left Mike Lee to the wolves with that one. Your thoughts?
Yes, I was going to say I thought he did really well. I mean, Mike Lee did, he did okay, but yeah, McMullen is. I mean, he's tough on that debate stage. He's a smart guy. I mean, he really is. I mean, he was. I mentioned it I think before on the podcast. I mean, the guy was in the CIA for a while, and he's been around politics for some years now, and he's a longtime Republican, and gets out, or I say gets out of, leaves the party in 2016. He was upset over Donald Trump, et cetera. And so I will say this. What's interesting about this race is that, Democrats didn't put someone in. They went all in on not on Mike Lee, rather, but Evan McMullen. And by doing that, I want to remind listeners, like, while he's going to be or says if he wins he'll be an independent, he's still a conservative guy at heart. I mean, I don't think he's going to come in there and be turn into a really progressive guy overnight or anything like that. But I think people like seeing how an independent out of nowhere is holding, their own, possibly going to win an election. I think it's kind of refreshing for people to hear someone say that, hey, if you elect me, I'm going to go in and be, a true independent. And I'm not going to get down, you know, in the weeds on a whole bunch of political party drama rather. Now, Mike Lee tried to use that against him in the debate. He said, "Hey, you owe it to the constituents to tell us how you're going to vote, how you're going to represent us." And so that was actually one of the angles that Lee tried to use against him. Again, he was getting pushed, I think Lee got pushed back some on that, but and I say that he's a pretty conservative guy or a conservative guy. He still has mentioned though that again he likes bipartisanship, et cetera. And he said, if I was in the Senate, I probably would have supported that infrastructure bill. I probably would have supported the gun safety measures that went through the Senate earlier this year. So I think there's some real sign this guy can, come in and be a true independent and do good things for Utah and the country if he wins. And with that being said, Phil, does he have a shot at winning out there? Does he have a shot at knocking off the incumbent Mike Lee?
I wish, but no.
Really?
Lee's still an 8-point favorite in the polls. Now, granted, there hasn't. The last poll was October 11th. Yeah, I just it's not looking good. Now, again, with that being said, I don't really trust polls, but we'll see. You never know. I think it would be a good win and a good pickup. Not necessarily a pickup for Democrats or independents, but a good lack of that for Republicans. But there was another debate that made quite a bit of news in Georgia between Marcus Flowers and Marjorie Taylor Greene, which we've already said it, I think multiple times on here that that race is pretty much unwinnable by Marcus Flowers just because of the district that they're running. But it was a pretty hilarious debate. You want to talk about mudslinging? Let's play a clip real quick. Here we go.
And yes, our law enforcement officials, and every one of them that I've talked to, almost to a person, has said Marjorie Taylor Greene is not who they want representing them. So yes, this campaign is about Marcus Flowers, not MTG. Thank you.
Josh Rowe, it's your turn. I need a rebuttal to that. You cannot accuse me of insurrection. I was a victim of the January 6th riot just as much as any other member of Congress. That was the third day I had on the job. I had nothing to do with what happened there that day, and I will not have you accuse me of that. That is wrong of you to do. You're lying about me, and you will not defame my character in that manner.
Did Joe Biden win the election, Congresswoman Greene?
Joe Biden is the president of the United States.
Absolutely, but you pushed a big lie that said he did not win the election.
There was election fraud.
You drove those people to the Capitol on January 6th with your lie.
We're going to move on. Josh Rowe, it's your turn to ask
and my husband has
Marjorie
proof of it.
Taylor Greene.
We have FOIA evidence of proof of election fraud that came out.
Excuse me, we're ready to move on to the next
Okay,
question
but
for
he's
you.
not going to accuse me of a crime.
Would you
when
like
I
your
have
question?
Not committed
Would
one.
you like your question?
Yes, ma'am,
Thank
I
you.
would. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Liar, by the way.
All right, and with that being said, could this have gotten any crazier, Cam?
I don't think so. I mean, both sides came out and said that they won this debate. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene's been all over the place insisting she won the debate. I don't even know where she was going with some of this stuff that she was bringing up. Do you?
No, I mean, it did just sound like a lot of incoherent rambling. And I don't even know that there's too much more to be said about this one. It's the debate was vastly entertaining. However, we kind of just the writing on the wall speaks for itself. I mean, Marcus Flowers, while he has raised a ton of money, just does not really stand a chance in this one.
No, I totally agree. I found it odd that, I mean, she's out there attacking the guy because he wears a cowboy hat. I mean, that seemed to be something she was obsessing over. Like, you wear a cowboy hat and you don't own one single cow. And I mean, at one point she was attacking the moderator. She was attacking the press. I mean, she was just kind of all over the place. And I mean, I guess, I mean, like you said, though, at the end of all of this, it doesn't really matter because she is going to take this race quite easily. I mean, and I've said this before, right? I mean, if people really want to take down Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia, in that 14th district that she represents, I mean, they need to challenge her in the primaries. That's really where it needs to come from, and that's, I don't think he would do it, but it would be interesting if in a couple of years, Marcus Flowers turns to a Republican and tries to give her a strong arm challenge out there in the primaries. But I mean, I do. That's if people want to, if somebody is serious about taking down Marjorie Taylor Greene in that district, like I said, it's got to come from the primaries. So this one's too far gone, but it did present some entertainment. I mean, I think every time Marjorie Taylor Greene gets on the stage, she brings us some entertainment. But there was another debate down there in Georgia, and that was this past week between the governor candidates, Kemp versus Abrams. And that one was, that was a lot of mudslinging there too. I mean, Kemp was pushing Abrams hard on, her ties to Biden, and you know, he was pushing her on crime, and Stacey Abrams. I mean, she's no rookie at this either. I mean, she knows how to debate and stuff. So I mean, they were pushing back and forth on it. This one's kind of gone back and forth in the polls some, but I definitely think Brian Kemp has, the advantage down there in Georgia. I think Georgia's, a pretty red state, as I oftentimes say. I will give Abrams a little credit. She tends to overperform, in the races that she's been in. So, I mean, that could help her a little bit on election day, but I mean, we'll see going forward. I think you've got some news about a lot of early voting going on in Georgia, right, Phil?
Yeah, so this is really kind of interesting, and we're going to see how it works out. I mean, historically, early voting has leaned heavily Democratic, but after the first day of early voting that opened this week in Georgia, they were getting numbers that were exceeding the 2018 midterms, which is significant. With that being said, by the end of the week, the numbers from early voting were higher than trends from the 2020 presidential election, which is nuts. Now, does this help push the Democrats over the edge because we typically look at those, like I said, the early voting as leaning Democrat, or is there more enthusiasm on both parties? I don't know. I think it's too early to tell, but I would say it's certainly not a bad sign for Abrams and Warnock in Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you some there, and that the early vote oftentimes has been Democrats. But I was as I was looking into some of these Georgia races yet again. I mean, as particularly the Kemp Abrams one. I mean, that was one of the things that Kemp is, why he was pushing Abrams so hard on being tied to Biden, because Biden is deeply unpopular in Georgia, even though he carried the state in the last election. He's very unpopular in that state right now. Um, we'll see how this one goes there. Again, I have to believe Kemp wins it. I think the Warnock Walker one is a little closer. I've been saying the last few weeks I think Walker wins it, but I think that one's going to be a little closer than the governor one as we go forward. But again, that is some interesting news that you bring up about the early voting, and again, we'll just wait here in a couple of weeks and see how all that pans out. But I want to shift into some races now, since we kind of have been doing that with the debates. But, I mentioned earlier how momentum seems to be definitely on the Republican side right now. And we'll see how that goes in the next couple of weeks. But what's interesting is looking at these races that we're going to look at. State of Rhode Island is what first one we'll look at tonight. Yeah, so in Rhode Island, second congressional district, this is a Democrat seat, and it looks like the Republicans have a shot at flipping it. Alan Fung versus Seth Magaziner. Um, a lot of mudslinging going on back and forth. There was a debate happened earlier on with it, but right now Fung is up in the polls. He's hitting Magaziner pretty hard. We'll see, but momentum seems to be with him. Phil, can the Republicans flip a seat here in this blue state?
Yeah, I mean, it's looking like they're going to. I mean, there's, uh, the polls are kind of all over the place with this one, but a majority of them have Fung with a pretty decent lead. So I think it could get flipped. But we knew, there weren't going to be House seats that were flipping anyway.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I
But
want to
I,
speaking. Well, I was going to just switch gears here quick to another race though. Speaking of seats flipping, this New York governor's race. This has been a very hot, or I say hot. It's been something that's been locked down by the Democrats for years. It's been 20 years since a Republican has won a statewide office in New York, and the I'll be honest with you, they have a very competitive governor race. Governor Hochul's up against a Republican, Lee Zeldin, who's soaring in the polls. I mean, a few weeks ago, this guy was like down by 24 points, and now there's some polls have him anywhere from 4 to 6 points behind. He's pushing her hard on crime. Trump endorsed him, and he's downplaying the endorsement. Kind of trying to distance himself, pushing his stuff in the economy.
yeah, which
He's
real
doing.
quick, if we want to, I just want to say that he is pushing the crime thing, like, very much so. But did you see the article this week that came out about how his time in Congress has been spent like not voting on a lot of stuff? So not only is he not like, getting in there, but there were three major crime bills that were presented on the House floor, and he registered a no vote for every single one of them. Like, not he voted nay, but he just did not vote at all.
Well,
So for him to come out and point out that,
it's working.
He's going to be tough on crime.
Well, here's what he is doing, though, and it seems to be working for him. He is doing basically daily press briefings around, like at subway stations around New York, and he's like I said, he's really trying to get that message out, and it's resonating. I mean, I heard some interviews with people even in New York City who are like, man, I'm tired of crime. And I don't normally vote Republican, but I am seriously looking at this guy. And so the polls could be wrong, but man, when you see someone jump that much, that's got to be something that's got to make some Democrats nervous. I mean, they came into these races thinking that they were going to be able to ride the abortion and the abortion stuff, and they were going to be able to kind of ride the Trump news into possibly keeping hold of the Senate and maybe even holding the House. But it's not looking good for him right now. Again, things can change in the next couple of weeks, but Phil, that's a tough one. I mean,
yeah, keep in mind that
does this Zeldin have a chance?
Zeldin doesn't. No, Zeldin doesn't stand a chance. And October 12th through 14th, there was a Siena College poll, still had Hochul with double digits. So I think it's tightening, but
there was just an Emerson one though that had him 4 points. So I don't know. I think this is one to keep an eye on. I will agree with you that it's probably going to be tough for him to win, but it's interesting how much he's pushing forward that. So one other race quick here. I'll go to the state of Indiana. Tight race over there. Todd Young. This is for the senator for Senate, by the way. Todd Young versus Tom McDermott, mayor of Hammond, Indiana. So Indiana's a really red state. To be honest with you, I'm surprised we're even talking about this race, but I mean, McDermott's has closed the gap. I mean, it's down to, I haven't seen a recent poll on this, but here a few weeks back, I mean, he had it up to like a 2 to 3 point lead was all Young had. So he closed the gap a little bit on it. But again, Todd Young is an incumbent. He's going to be tough to beat there in a pretty darn red state. He's, military veteran, he was enlisted Navy, went on to the Naval Academy, Marine Corps officer. I think he'll easily carry this. The only reason I'm even bringing it up is McDermott, like I said, seems to be sort of closing the gap a little bit, but I don't think this race is terribly competitive. What do you think, Phil?
I think it's a lot more competitive than the other two we talked about, right? I think McDermott stands a better chance of upending the incumbent here than Zeldin does in New York, and I think he has a better chance than Magaziner in Rhode Island. I'll be honest with you, and I don't know what it is, but it's shocking to me that we have these races that are so tight in these kind of Rust Belt Midwest states. Um, but I think that is a sign that momentum is shifting in certain places around the country.
Yeah, it
With
is.
with that being said,
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
with that being said, yeah, with that being said, you know, we talk about it all the time on here. Um, but there is some crazy stuff going on. Before we kind of wrap it up, there is some crazy stuff going on out in Arizona. Um, do you want to switch move out west a little bit and talk about that state here for a couple of minutes before we wrap it up?
Well, I guess we might as well. I mean, Arizona is just like, yeah. Again, we talk about Trump being in the news. I mean, I swear, if we need some news to talk about, we just look out towards Arizona. I mean, that state has got, yeah. There's constantly they're in the news about you name it going on out there. I mean, Phil, did you, one thing they've got going on? I'll tell you, Carrie Lake doing pretty well in the polls. She's definitely up, and her opponent, Katie Hobbs, is basically dodging debates with her. I don't think that looks good at all for Hobbs. Do you?
No, I don't think it's a good move. But what I will say is I kind of understand why. I mean, I think Katie Hobbs just knows she is not probably going to out debate Carrie Lake. With her past as a news reporter, chances are, right? She was I think a Fox 5 affiliate news reporter or whatever it is out in Arizona for a long time. She's probably she's probably been at several debates and helped moderate them as part of, because that's what typically local newscasters do. But this is still a really close race. I mean, Lake right now is only up by a point. And there's like quite a few polls coming out, but they're kind of showing conflicting stuff, so it's hard to tell. I mean, you had Lake resoundingly up at the end of September, beginning of October. Then there's kind of some movement. Maybe she's not as up as high as she is, and so this is all over the place. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think every politician should debate.
yeah.
That's kind of the way I feel about it.
I'm the same way. I think every politician owes it to debate. I mean, this is Hobbs. You need to get out there and debate. I mean, you want to hold office, you got to get on that stage. I mean, there's been some other races we've seen this where people seem to be kind of dodging debate. Certainly up in Pennsylvania, John Fetterman's been doing everything he possibly can to stay off the debate stage. Although it looks like they are going to debate this
Well,
next week, and I'm looking forward to that one too.
the man just had a stroke, so give him a break, Cam. I mean,
Well,
he's gonna do the debate.
I mean,
He's
I'll give
gonna
him
do
a,
the debate. I
yeah,
mean,
I'll give him credit, right? I mean, he did have a stroke, but at the end of the day, the people of Pennsylvania need to know you can do the job. And by the way, his stroke, yeah, I get it. He had a stroke, but his doctors fully cleared him. So I find it interesting, as do many others, that he has held off on debating until after the early voting started in Pennsylvania. But that's a very close race that we can save that for this next week, because like I said, they've got a debate coming up. So going back to Arizona though, I mean, Phil, isn't there some other wacky stuff they had in the news? Weren't some people getting threatened when they're trying to turn in early ballots out there?
yeah, there's just several reports too. I mean, we said in the talk up, I called it Florida 2.0 because there's just so much crazy stuff out there. Whether it's the mustache, this former oath keeper, or actually I think he's still an oath keeper.
Yeah, he's still an oath keeper.
There's
Yep.
crazy, yeah, there's crazy reporting around um, the coroner's race. I'm not even going to talk about it because it's like befuddling. But there's like a nuts coroner race going on in Arizona. Um, I mean, the fact that that a coroner's race is picking
Yeah,
up news
that's
and I'm hearing about it is crazy. But
that is
there
crazy.
was like several reports that Yeah, there were several reports this week that came out around Arizona's early voting opening up, and there's like QAnon conspiracy, whatever they are. I don't even know that it was reported actually, like what their belief was, but it had basically been said that they were accusing people of being mules, right? Like ballot mules, which is probably based off of that pseudo documentary that was released earlier or last year about election fraud, which was wholly debunked. But voters are getting harassed, followed. People are taking pictures of them, and stalking them as they're dropping off their ballots. I mean, what is going on?
I,
Florida, get your act, or sorry, Arizona, get your act together.
yeah, I will say this. I do not want to predict any race out there. Um, just because I think that state is so volatile and there's so much going on out there that yeah, I mean, it seems like every race out there is in the news. I mean, you talked about it earlier. We've talked about it before. You know, yeah, these races. I mean, some of these races that we've got going on out there, like the mustache, his race. Like, I mean, in an ordinary year, somebody like him would be flying under, the radar totally. But now all of a sudden he's out there and, you know, I mean, you said a coroner's race. I mean, when do we ever talk about races like that? So yeah,
Yeah, well, and
it's
that's the
crazy.
thing is like you a majority of the races in Arizona, I think all of them except for the governor's race have like January 6th rioters running. I mean, this is nuts. Um,
Yeah,
but
well,
with
I
that
don't know
being
about.
said, I mean,
To be fair, I don't know about the Senate race. Blake Masters, I don't. He wasn't rioting that I'm aware of. That I'm aware
he
of.
was there.
Okay, I wasn't aware of
He
that.
was there. So
I know the mustache Mark Fincham. He was there. Now he says he wasn't rioting. He was simply at the protest. So, but regardless, yes, there's a lot going on in Arizona. I feel like we could do a whole show on everything in Arizona. But we are about out of time tonight. So I'll just, as we wrap this thing up, I'll throw out one more quick plug on, certainly like us on our social media, follow us, send us messages, and jump on our website, pocketpolitics.co. It's time for our parting shots. Phill, what do you have for your parting shot tonight?
I want to let you go first. This is I've gone first the last couple of times, so I'm going to give you all the glory today. What do you have?
Oh, wow, you're switching gears on me. Okay, well, I have, for my parting shot tonight, I've got a pretty simple one yet again where I just want to plug it's fall and get out and enjoy it. Okay. You talked at the beginning of the show about me having some luck hunting this morning. I certainly did, bagging a fall turkey. And you know what? There's hunting seasons all across the country, be it small game, archery deer here coming in November. A lot of states will have their firearms deer open. Sir, I talked about the fall turkey, just a lot of stuff going on out there. We get into late October now. Some states have their trapping seasons open, and that'll certainly more of them open up in November. And you know what? Fall fishing is great. And if you're not into fishing, hunting, trapping, any of that kind of stuff, and get out there and do some hiking and enjoy the fall colors or bike or whatever. But yeah, it's fall. Get out and enjoy it. That's what I've got. Phill, over to you.
Yeah, the colors are on full display. I will say one place you may not want to get out is certain beaches in Delaware. So it came out this week that because of a couple of storm patterns and stuff, they've been having these mantis shrimp wash up on the beach. Um, and these things, believe it or not, can actually like severely injure human beings. So they put out several alerts that said if you see these things, stay away from them, even if they look like they're dead. My daughter told me about this. It was crazy. So I looked up a YouTube video because I was kind of skeptical. And these are some scary shrimp, Cam.
Huh.
If you get a chance, go on YouTube and check it out. There's all kinds of crazy stuff about these things. They're kind of arm attachment that they use to inflict damage. it's so fast. It's like 80 times faster than the blink of an eye. And it's so fast that when they attack underwater, it temporarily boils the water around that appendage. I mean, this is crazy stuff. So
wow,
certainly get out. But if you are getting out on the beaches in Delaware, maybe keep your eyes peeled so that you don't get severely injured.
That is crazy, by the way.
Right, that's what I said. There's even videos about people getting them on, fishing for them and then eating them. Which, when you see them, it doesn't look like anything I would want to eat, but you never know. With that being said, though, that's it for this week. But we will be back next week. Any last things, Cameron?
No, I think it's been another great episode, and I'm looking forward to next week as we get closer to these midterms. There's plenty to talk about and plenty of stuff in the news. So, Phil, I'm ready to sign off.
All right, that's all I got. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.
All right, until next time.
Bye.